Evelyn stood, squaring her shoulders. You taught me everything I know about strategy, about patience, about striking when your opponent least expects it. Her smile was a dangerous thing. And you forgot the most important rule of all. Never underestimate your enemy. Chapter 4. The sin she didn't know she committed. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and cold, winter sunlight glinting off the glass and steel of the Crawford Industries building. Evelyn had not returned to the Kingston penthouse after her confrontation with Leonard. Instead, she had spent the night in her childhood bedroom at the Crawford estate, the one building Leonard had not yet managed to seize. As she dressed in a crisp white suit, her mother's favorite color for important battles, Evelyn replayed Leonard's revelations, filling in the gaps of a story she had unwittingly become part of. The collapse of Kingston Technologies had been just one more business decision to her father. Regrettable but necessary. To the Kingston family, it had been apocalyptic. Harold Kingston, once a respected innovator, had lost not just his company, but his identity. Creditors had taken their home, their savings, even family heirlooms sold to cover debts. Leonard and his mother had moved to a small apartment in a neighborhood plagued by crime. Eleanor Kingston, raised in privilege and unprepared for poverty, had sunk into depression. Unable to find work, haunted by her husband's death, she had taken her own life, leaving 17-year-old Leonard truly alone. He's been planning this for 20 years, Evelyn murmured to her reflection, 20 years of focused, patient hatred. Part of her, a small, wounded part, almost admired the dedication. Such single-minded pursuit of a goal was extraordinary, even if the goal itself was destruction. Leonard had built his entire empire with one purpose: to position himself to destroy the Crawfords. Meeting her had accelerated his timeline. The Crawford heiress, what better way to gain insider access than to marry her? She had been the perfect target. Idealistic, romantic, trusting to a fault. The fact that she was beautiful and intelligent enough to hold his interest was merely a bonus. Had any of it been real, she wondered, fastening her grandmother's locket around her neck. That was the question that had kept her awake all night. There had been moments, quiet, private moments, when the mask had seemed to slip. When Leonard's touch had felt genuine, his laughter unguarded, his attention sincere. But perhaps that was simply the skill of a master manipulator, or her own wishful thinking. In the harsh light of day, the truth was inescapable. Leonard Kingston had married her for revenge. Nothing more. The board meeting was scheduled for 9. At 8:30, Evelyn was seated in her father's office, reviewing documents with Richard and their legal team. You understand what you're asking, Richard said gravely. Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. Your marriage? My marriage was never real, Evelyn replied, her voice steady. Let's proceed. At precisely 9 o'clock, they entered the boardroom. Leonard was already seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his allies, board members he had either bought or intimidated into supporting him. He betrayed no surprise at seeing Evelyn, merely inclining his head in acknowledgement. Glad you could join us, Mrs. Kingston, he said smoothly, though I'm afraid this is a closed board meeting. Family members without board positions. I have every right to be here, Evelyn interrupted, her gaze unwavering, as the holder of the Crawford family trust shares. A flicker of confusion crossed Leonard's face. Those shares were transferred to Kingston Holdings under the terms of our marriage contract. A contract obtained through fraud, Richard Crawford interjected, nodding to their lawyer. Which makes it unenforceable. Leonard's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Fraud is a serious accusation, Richard. I hope you have evidence to support it. We do. Evelyn placed a flash drive on the table, everything from the shell companies you use to acquire shares to the offshore accounts where you plan to funnel assets from the liquidation to the falsified financial reports you've been feeding the board for months. Murmurs rippled around the table as her rich husband married her for revenge. Murmurs rippled around the table as Leonard's allies exchanged uneasy glances. Leonard himself remained outwardly calm, but Evelyn, who had studied every micro-expression of his face during their time together, saw the subtle tightening of his jaw. Allegations without substance, he said dismissively. Crawford Industries is failing. The numbers speak for themselves. Numbers that your people manipulated, Evelyn countered. She turned to address the board directly. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past year, you've been presented with financial reports showing declining profits, weakening market position, and mounting debt. Those reports were fabricated. She nodded to the company's longtime CFO, who had been sidelined months ago after questioning Kingston's figures. He distributed folders to each board member. These are the actual performance metrics, verified by 3 independent accounting firms. Crawford Industries isn't failing, it's thriving. The supposed debt crisis was manufactured to justify the fire sale Leonard is proposing today. The boardroom erupted in confused conversation. One of the oldest members, who had served since Richard's father's time, spoke up. If this is true, it's securities fraud, criminal manipulation. Leonard's expression darkened. This is a desperate attempt by the Crawfords to maintain control of a company they've run into the ground. My wife is understandably emotional, but business decisions can't be based on sentiment. This has nothing to do with sentiment, Evelyn said coldly, and everything to do with a 20-year vendetta. She pressed a button on her laptop, and the large screen at the end of the boardroom came to life. A newspaper clipping appeared, the announcement of Harold Kingston's death. Then another, Elena Kingston's obituary, noting that she was survived by her son, Leonard. The Kingston tragedy happened 2 decades ago, Evelyn continued. Richard Crawford's investment firm pulled funding from Kingston Technologies, triggering its collapse. Harold Kingston died of a heart attack. 6 months later, Elena Kingston took her own life. Her eyes met Leonard's across the table, and their son vowed revenge. The board members watched in stunned silence as Evelyn laid out the evidence, the pattern of acquisitions targeting Crawford partners, the gradual positioning of Kingston allies in key positions, and finally the marriage that gave Leonard access to Crawford family shares. He never loved me, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the pain behind the words. I was just another acquisition, the final piece in a plan to destroy my family, as he believes my family destroyed his. Leonard stood abruptly, his careful composure cracking. You have no idea what your family did, he snarled. Your father didn't just pull funding, he sabotaged us. He promised to stay through the development phase, then yanked support the moment we were most vulnerable. It was business, Richard started, but Leonard cut him off with a bitter laugh. Business? My father begged you, showed you we were 3 months from a breakthrough that would have changed everything. My mother got on her knees in your office, Richard, and you said, what was it again? The Kingstons should learn that business isn't for amateurs. The room fell silent. Richard Crawford paled, looking suddenly older. Leonard, I never meant. You didn't mean for my father to die of stress. For my mother to swallow a bottle of pills because she couldn't face another day of humiliation. Leonard's voice vibrated with 2 decades of contained rage. You Crawfords think you can decide someone's worth with a signature on a document. You destroyed my family without a second thought. For the first time, Evelyn saw the wounded boy beneath Leonard's polished exterior, the teenager who had lost everything, whose pain had calcified into a lifelong mission of retribution. In that moment, understanding didn't bring forgiveness, but it brought clarity. You're right, she said quietly. What happened to your family was tragic. Unjust. No business decision should cost lives. She looked at her father, whose face showed genuine remorse. The Crawfords have a sin to answer for. Leonard seemed momentarily thrown by her acknowledgement, but his moment of vulnerability passed quickly, his expression hardening once more. Pretty words won't change what I'm about to do. No, Evelyn agreed, but this might. She slid a document across the table, a temporary restraining order preventing any vote on dissolution until the fraud allegations are investigated. Signed by Judge Harmond an hour ago. Leonard's face darkened as he scanned the document. This is a delay, nothing more. Perhaps, Evelyn conceded, but it gives us time for the second part. She produced another document. This is a petition for divorce, citing fraud and criminal conspiracy. I'm also seeking an immediate freeze on all Kingston assets pending investigation into the illicit financial maneuvers used in your takeover attempt. For the first time, Leonard looked genuinely alarmed. You can't. I already have. Her voice was steel, wrapped in silk. Every email, every document, every conversation where you outlined your revenge plan, it's all been delivered to the SEC, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and the District Attorney's Office. The blood drained from Leonard's face as he realized the extent of her counterattack. You're bluffing. Am I? Perhaps you should check your phone. She glanced at her watch. Right about now, federal agents should be entering Kingston Tower with warrants. Simultaneously, our forensic accountants are accessing the servers containing evidence of your market manipulation. She leaned forward. You taught me to think 5 moves ahead, Leonard. I'm just following your example. The boardroom door opened and 2 federal agents entered, followed by Richard's head of security. Mr. Kingston, one of the agents said formally, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage. As Leonard was read his rights, his eyes never left Evelyn's. In them she saw something unexpected, not hatred or rage, but a flicker of respect, quickly replaced by cold calculation. This isn't over, he said quietly as the agents prepared to escort him out. You've won the battle, not the war. Evelyn stood, facing the man she had once loved with all her heart. The difference between us, Leonard, is that I never wanted a war. I just wanted a husband. As the doors closed behind him, the weight of everything, the betrayal, the confrontation, the uncertain future, suddenly crashed down upon her. Richard moved to her side, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You did it, Evie, he said softly. You saved the company. She shook her head, tears finally threatening to fall. No, Dad. I stopped a man consumed by revenge from destroying what 3 generations of Crawfords built, but the real damage. She pressed a hand to her heart. That's already done. Chapter 5, Falling Apart or Fighting Back. The weeks following Leonard's arrest passed in a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and media scrutiny. The story was irresistible to the press. Billionaire tycoon arrested for fraud in elaborate revenge plot against his wife's family. America's favorite power couple revealed to be a sham. The Crawford-Kingston saga dominated business news and tabloids alike. Evelyn retreated to the Crawford estate, the one place paparazzi couldn't easily reach. There, in the shelter of familiar walls, she allowed herself to finally feel the full impact of Leonard's betrayal. Some nights she woke gasping from dreams where Leonard still loved her, where their life together had been real. Those dreams were more painful than the nightmares where he revealed his true nature. At least the nightmares reflected reality. Sophie stayed with her through the worst of it, keeping vigil during the dark hours when doubt and pain threatened to overwhelm her. I keep asking myself what was real, Evelyn confessed one evening, curled on the window seat of her childhood bedroom. Were there moments when he forgot his plan, when he actually cared? Sophie sighed, sitting beside her. Ev, I don't know if that question has an answer. What matters is what you do now. What's left to do? The divorce proceedings are underway. The federal investigation is building a solid case. Crawford Industries is secure. Evelyn's laugh was hollow. Mission accomplished. That's not what I mean, Sophie said gently. Leonard spent 20 years letting revenge define his life. Are you going to let his betrayal define yours? The question lingered long after Sophie left. Evelyn wandered the grounds of the estate, her grandmother's gardens now touched with early spring green. Here she had made childhood wishes. Here she had dreamed of a future filled with purpose and love. Leonard had stolen 2 years of her life with his deception. Would she allow him to steal her future as well? That night, Evelyn made a decision. She would not be defined by victimhood. She would rebuild. Not just her life, but something more. The next morning, she called Richard. Dad, I need to talk to you about the foundation. 3 days later, Evelyn sat across from her father in the Crawford Industries boardroom, the same room where she had confronted Leonard. But today's meeting had a different purpose. I want to establish a new division, she explained, sliding a proposal across the table, focused on ethical business practices, corporate responsibility, and sustainable growth. Richard raised an eyebrow. This is ambitious. It's necessary, Evelyn countered. Kingston's revenge plot exposed vulnerabilities in how we operate. How many other families have been casualties of our business decisions? How many Harold and Elena Kingstons have we created without realizing it? Richard studied his daughter, seeing not just the pain she had endured, but the strength that had emerged from it. You want to change how Crawford Industries functions at its core. I want to ensure no one else's life is destroyed by our success, Evelyn corrected. Leonard was wrong in what he did, but he wasn't wrong about everything. There's a human cost to business decisions that we've ignored for too long. For a moment, Richard was silent, weighing her words. Then he nodded slowly. We'll need to restructure the board, create oversight committees. It won't be easy. The right things rarely are, Evelyn replied. As winter gave way to spring, Evelyn threw herself into the work of transformation. The Crawford Foundation expanded its focus to include support for families affected by corporate bankruptcies and economic displacement. A new ethics committee reviewed major business decisions for their human impact. Evelyn herself led a task force examining past Crawford Industries actions, identifying communities and individuals who had suffered collateral damage from their corporate strategies. The work was healing in ways therapy alone could not accomplish. Each family helped, each wrong addressed, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself from Leonard's manipulation. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings continued. Leonard, released on bail but confined to Manhattan with an ankle monitor, had assembled a team of the country's top criminal defense attorneys. The case promised to be one of the most complex financial crime prosecutions in years. Evelyn had avoided all contact with him since the arrest, communicating only through lawyers. But 6 months after the confrontation in the boardroom, she received a request she couldn't ignore. Leonard wanted to meet in person to discuss a settlement offer. You don't have to do this, her attorney advised. We can handle everything without direct contact. I know, Evelyn said, her voice steady. But I need to look him in the eye one more time, to finish this on my terms. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a conference room in the Federal Building downtown. Security would be present, and their attorneys would monitor the conversation. Even so, Evelyn's heart raced as she entered the room where Leonard waited. He looked different. Thinner, the perfect tailoring of his suit no longer hiding the weight he had lost. His eyes, however, remained the same, calculating, intense, revealing nothing he didn't wish to show. Evelyn, he said, rising as she entered. Thank you for coming. Let's keep this professional, she replied, taking a seat across from him. I understand you have a proposal. Leonard studied her for a moment before speaking. You look well. The Crawford Foundation's new initiatives have been making headlines. I didn't come to discuss my work, Evelyn said evenly. What's your offer? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Direct as always. Very well. He pushed a document folder toward her. Full financial disclosure. All Kingston assets, legitimate and otherwise, in exchange for your testimony focusing solely on the financial crimes and not on our personal relationship. Evelyn's eyebrows rose as she skimmed the contents. You're offering to surrender everything. Why? Because dragging this out benefits neither of us, Leonard replied. I've lost, Evelyn. The evidence your team uncovered ensures that. Now it's about damage control. For your reputation, you mean? You want to be remembered as a financial criminal, not a man who married a woman as part of a revenge plot. Something flickered in his eyes. Discomfort, perhaps, or possibly regret. My public image is beyond salvaging. This is about something else. What? Leonard hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. When you build your life around destroying someone, you don't plan for what comes after. Whether I get 5 years or 20, I need to find a new purpose. He met her gaze directly, starting with making amends where I can. Evelyn felt a familiar ache in her chest, the longing for this moment of apparent sincerity to be real, coupled with the hard-earned knowledge that Leonard Kingston was a master of manipulation. Pretty words, she said softly. But why should I believe anything you say? You shouldn't, he acknowledged. I've given you every reason to doubt me, but the offer stands regardless. Full cooperation, full disclosure. My attorneys have already begun the process with the federal prosecutors. Evelyn closed the folder, her mind racing. If Leonard was telling the truth, his cooperation would spare her months of grueling testimony, of having the most painful chapter of her life dissected in court. It would also provide Crawford Industries with complete restitution. But trusting Leonard again, even in this limited capacity, felt dangerous. "I'll discuss it with my legal team," she said finally, rising to leave. "Evelyn." Leonard's voice stopped her at the door. When she turned, his usual mask of control had slipped, revealing something raw beneath. When you asked if any of it was real, the answer is yes. Not at first. But there were moments when I forgot why I had pursued you, when the revenge felt hollow compared to what we could have had. Tears pricked at her eyes, but Evelyn refused to let them fall. "And yet you chose revenge anyway." "I did," he admitted quietly. "It's the choice I'll regret for the rest of my life." She studied him, searching for the lie, for the calculation behind his words. But for once, Leonard Kingston seemed utterly transparent. Whether from exhaustion, defeat, or genuine remorse, his walls had come down. "Goodbye, Leonard," she said simply, and walked away, not from anger or fear this time, but from the newfound strength of someone who had faced her deepest pain and survived. Chapter 6. The Reversal. Leonard's cooperation proved genuine. Over the next month, he provided federal investigators with detailed information about his financial maneuvers, implicating several of his top executives, but accepting primary responsibility himself. The evidence he surrendered went far beyond what Evelyn's team had uncovered, revealing the full extent of his decades-long campaign. In exchange for his cooperation, prosecutors offered a plea deal. Guilty pleas to reduced charges of securities fraud and conspiracy, with a recommended sentence of 7 years. The personal aspects of the case, the revenge plot, the fraudulent marriage, were kept from the public record. Evelyn, true to her word, reviewed the settlement with her attorneys. After careful consideration, she accepted it, with one additional condition: a significant portion of Kingston's legitimate assets would be used to establish a foundation for families affected by corporate failures, with particular focus on mental health support for children in financial crisis. To her surprise, Leonard agreed without hesitation. On the day of his sentencing, Evelyn sat in the back of the courtroom watching as the man she had once believed was her soulmate accepted the consequences of his actions. His statement to the court was brief, without excuses or justifications. When the judge asked if he understood the harm he had caused, Leonard's eyes found Evelyn's across the crowded room. "More than I can express, Your Honor," he said quietly, "and it's harm I can never fully repair." As federal marshals led him away to begin his sentence, Evelyn felt not the vindication she had expected, but a complex mixture of closure and sadness for all that might have been. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for her statement. Sophie, ever protective, tried to hustle her to a waiting car, but Evelyn paused. "Ms. Crawford, how do you feel about the sentencing?" a journalist called out. Evelyn faced the cameras, poised and composed. "Today isn't about feelings. It's about accountability. Mr. Kingston's actions caused real harm to many people, including myself. But what matters now is moving forward and ensuring something positive comes from this painful chapter." "Do you forgive him?" another reporter shouted. The question gave her pause. Forgiveness had seemed impossible in the darkest days after Leonard's betrayal. Even now, the wound was too fresh, the damage too profound. "Forgiveness is a process, not an event," she said finally. "What I can say is that I refuse to let bitterness define my future, the way revenge defined his past." With that, she slipped into the waiting car, leaving the media frenzy behind. The next year marked a period of remarkable transformation for Crawford Industries, for the foundation, and for Evelyn herself. Free from the shadow of Leonard's machinations, she emerged as a formidable business leader in her own right, guiding the company toward a new model of corporate responsibility that didn't sacrifice profitability for ethics. The Crawford Kingston Foundation, as it was ironically named, helped hundreds of families navigate financial catastrophe without the tragic outcomes the Kingston family had experienced. Evelyn instituted a scholarship program specifically for teenagers who had lost parents to suicide or stress-related illness, creating the support system Leonard had lacked at 17. 18 months after the sentencing, Evelyn received an unexpected letter from the Federal Correctional Facility, where Leonard was serving his time. For days, it sat unopened on her desk, a Pandora's box she wasn't sure she wanted to open. When she finally broke the seal, the content surprised her. There was no plea for forgiveness, no attempt to reopen closed wounds. Instead, Leonard had sent the deed to his family's original home, a modest house in Connecticut that had been foreclosed when Kingston Technologies collapsed. He had repurchased it secretly years ago, but had never visited. "This house represents both the beginning and end of my obsession," he wrote. "The foundation you've created is helping families like mine was. Perhaps this property could serve them better than it served me. The choice is yours, as it should have been all along." Evelyn visited the house the following week. It stood empty and neglected, but structurally sound, a small, unremarkable colonial that had once housed a family with dreams. Standing in what must have been teenage Leonard's bedroom, she tried to imagine the boy he had been before tragedy and revenge had hardened him. 3 months later, the house reopened as the first Kingston Family Center, a place where families in financial crisis could receive counseling, job placement assistance, and temporary housing if needed. Evelyn didn't attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony, but she sent a simple note to Leonard informing him of the center's purpose. His reply came 2 weeks later. "Thank you for creating something better than I could have imagined." Chapter 7. Tables turned 3 years into Leonard's sentence. Evelyn received word that he was eligible for early release due to his ongoing cooperation with authorities investigating wider financial crimes. His parole hearing was scheduled for the following month, and as the primary victim, she had the right to make a statement. "Are you going?" Sophie asked when Evelyn shared the news over dinner. "I don't know," Evelyn admitted. "Part of me wants to close that chapter completely. Another part feels like I should see it through to the end." "What would you even say? Please keep my revenge-obsessed ex-husband locked up? Or, sure, let him out, he's learned his lesson." Evelyn smiled faintly at her friend's characterization. "That's the question, isn't it? I'm not sure I know the answer." In the weeks leading up to the hearing, Evelyn immersed herself in work, expanding the Crawford Kingston Foundation's reach internationally. But Leonard's potential release lingered in the back of her mind, like an unresolved chord. The night before the hearing, she made her decision. The next morning found her in a small hearing room at the correctional facility, seated at the back as Leonard's case was presented. He entered in prison-issued clothing, thinner than she remembered, his once perfect hair grown longer. When he spotted her, genuine surprise registered on his face, followed by something more complex, relief perhaps, or gratitude. The parole board reviewed his case. Exemplary behavior, continued cooperation with ongoing investigations, completion of financial counseling programs he had developed for other white-collar inmates. His attorney spoke of rehabilitation and the low risk of reoffending. When asked if he had a statement, Leonard spoke without notes, his voice quieter than the confident tone Evelyn remembered. "I came to prison believing I was the victim of a grand injustice," he began. "I'd spent most of my life defining myself by what had been taken from me. It's taken 3 years of reflection to understand that I became precisely what I hated, someone who destroyed lives in pursuit of personal gain." He paused, meeting the eyes of each board member in turn. "I can't undo the pain I've caused, but I can commit to living differently. Not for a reduced sentence, but because I've seen firsthand how revenge poisoned my life and hurt innocent people, most notably my former wife." The board chairman nodded, then turned to Evelyn. "Ms. Crawford, you've submitted a written statement, but would you like to address the board directly as well?" All eyes turned to her. Leonard's gaze was steady but resigned, as if he expected her opposition and had accepted it as just. Evelyn approached the podium, her heart racing despite her outward composure. "Leonard Kingston married me as part of an elaborate revenge plot against my family," she began, her voice clear in the hushed room. "He manipulated me, lied to me, and used me as a pawn in a vendetta I knew nothing about. The damage he caused wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal." Leonard's eyes lowered, his shoulders tensing visibly. But, Evelyn continued, in the 3 years since his incarceration, I've had the opportunity to see another side of this situation. The foundation created from his assets has helped over 2,000 families avoid the fate that befell the Kingstons 23 years ago. The programs he's developed within the prison system have genuine merit. She took a deep breath, coming to the most difficult part. Revenge consumed Leonard Kingston's life for 20 years. It very nearly consumed mine after I discovered his betrayal. I choose to break that cycle. She met Leonard's shocked gaze directly. I believe he has paid his debt to society and to me. I do not oppose his early release. The silence that followed was profound. Leonard's eyes never left hers, filled with a bewildered gratitude that even his considerable self-control couldn't disguise. After deliberation, the board approved his release with strict conditions. 5 years of probation, continued cooperation with federal investigations, no involvement in financial management or investment activities, and regular counseling. As the hearing concluded, Evelyn slipped out quickly, unwilling to face Leonard directly. But in the parking lot, he caught up to her, keeping a respectful distance as she turned to face him. "Why?" he asked simply. Evelyn studied the man who had both loved and destroyed her. The changed man before her now, humbled but somehow more authentic than the perfect husband he had pretended to be. "Not for you," she said honestly. "For me. Because holding on to resentment would make me more like the version of you I never want to become." Leonard nodded slowly. "I don't deserve your mercy." "Probably not," she agreed, "but deserving has nothing to do with it." An uncertain silence stretched between them. Two people who had been as close as humans could be, now separated by an ocean of broken trust. "The Kingston Family Centers are expanding," Evelyn said finally, 5 new locations opening next year. They need someone who understands firsthand what those families are facing. She met his eyes steadily. "When you're settled, if you're interested, there could be a place for you there." Leonard's composure cracked, genuine emotion breaking through. "After everything I did, you'd trust me with that." "Trust is earned," Evelyn replied. "This would be a chance to start earning it, not with me, but with the world you've spent so long trying to punish." She turned to go, then paused, looking back at the man who had once been her everything. "I learned something important from you, Leonard. Life isn't a business transaction or a zero-sum game. The most valuable things, love, trust, purpose, multiply when shared. They diminish when hoarded or weaponized." With those words, she walked away, not in anger or bitterness, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her deepest pain and emerged stronger, someone who had refused to let another's darkness dim her light. 5 years later, the Kingston Family Center in Boston was celebrating its 3rd anniversary. Children laughed in the playground, while parents networked with potential employers at the job fair inside. In a quiet corner of the community garden, Evelyn Crawford sat on a bench, watching the families with quiet satisfaction. "Quarterly reports," said a familiar voice behind her. "All centers showing steady growth in families served." Leonard placed the folder beside her before taking a seat on the opposite end of the bench. The years of prison and purpose had changed him. Silver now threaded his temples, and the sharp edges of his ambition had softened into something more thoughtful. As the outreach director for the Kingston Network, he worked tirelessly, often with the very families that companies like the old Crawford Industries might have displaced. "Boston's at capacity," Evelyn noted, skimming the documents. "We should consider expansion." "Already scouting locations," Leonard confirmed. "The mayor's office has suggested a property in Dorchester." Their professional relationship had evolved into a careful collaboration over the years. Never close, never personal, but effective. The foundation's work had garnered national recognition, with other corporations beginning to adopt their model of corporate responsibility. Evelyn had moved on in her personal life as well. Her engagement ring, a simple sapphire rather than an ostentatious diamond, caught the sunlight as she closed the folder. "Daniel's joining us for the donor dinner tonight," she said. "He has some ideas about expanding the mental health services." Leonard nodded. He had met Evelyn's fiancé several times. A trauma surgeon with a quiet strength and genuine compassion that made him perfect for her. There had been a time when seeing her with someone else might have sparked jealousy, But now he felt only a sincere hope that she had found the happiness she deserved. "I wanted to tell you first," Leonard said after a moment. "I've been offered a position with the Justice Department's Corporate Crime Division, consulting on prevention programs." Evelyn looked genuinely surprised. "That's unexpected." "For me too," he admitted with a small smile. "Apparently, who better to help prevent corporate fraud than someone who perfected it? Will you take it?" Leonard gazed across the playground, where a young boy about 7 was helping a smaller child climb the ladder to a slide. "I think so. The centers are running well. It feels like time for a new challenge." Evelyn studied him thoughtfully. From corporate criminal to Justice Department consultant. Life takes unexpected turns. Indeed it does. His eyes met hers briefly, acknowledging what neither of them ever discussed directly. The journey that had brought them here. From fairy tale romance to devastating betrayal to this complicated piece. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the sounds of children playing and parents chatting. Finally, Leonard spoke again, his voice quieter. "I've never properly thanked you," he said. "Not just for the parole hearing, but for all of this." He gestured to the center around them. "You could have destroyed me completely, used my own tactics against me. Instead, you created something meaningful from the wreckage." Evelyn considered his words. "Revenge would have been easier," she admitted. "There were days I wanted nothing more than to see you suffer as I had suffered, but easy isn't the same as right." "Your capacity for forgiveness, not forgiveness," she corrected gently. "Transformation. There's a difference." Leonard nodded slowly. "I stand corrected." He rose, recognizing the natural conclusion of their conversation. "I should check on the job fair. There's a family from New Hampshire I've been working with. Father lost his tech job, mother trying to manage 3 kids and her own startup. They remind me a bit of my parents before everything fell apart." "And you're making sure their story has a different ending," Evelyn observed. "Trying to," he agreed, "one family at a time." As he walked away, Evelyn watched the man who had once been her husband, the man who had married her for revenge, but had ultimately helped her discover her greatest purpose. Neither villain nor hero, but something more complex. A reminder that people could change, that pain could become purpose, that even the darkest chapters could lead to unexpected light. Her phone chimed with a message from Daniel. "On my way. Love you." Evelyn smiled, typing back quickly before rising to greet a young mother approaching with questions about the housing program. Her engagement ring caught the light again, not a symbol of the fairy tale she had once believed in, but of the deeper, truer love she had found after surviving the storm. The revenge that Leonard had spent decades planning had failed. The destruction he had intended had instead created an unexpected legacy of healing. And Evelyn, who had once believed herself broken beyond repair, had emerged not just whole, but stronger. A woman who had turned betrayal into blessing, pain into purpose. As she welcomed the young family into the center, Evelyn felt the final pieces of her past settling into place. The fairy tale was gone, replaced by something far more valuable. A life of meaning, love freely given and received, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the most powerful response to darkness is to create light. The end. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you won't miss any updates. Thank you, and remember, we love you.